I know. I love it.
Hi, Jyoti. Hi, Kavi. Oh, goodness, Kavita Modi. Hi.
Hi.
Good to see you.
See you too.
Good, good.
So I understand.
Live now? Yeah.
It says, yeah.
It's showing as live, yeah.
Yeah, it's showing.
Prasanna.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think it's showing as live, right?
it is. It is.
Yeah, it's okay.
Let me check now.
Excellent.
Hi, Prasanna.
Hi, Jyoti. I said hi.
Sue.
Right? Hi, Dr. Preetika.
Sorry, I'm a neurologist, neurosurgeon.
Dr. Pritika, I noticed that and I thought, oh my, I'm going to be very nervous myself today because I talk about neurochemistry and you're going to have to share your experience and insights, please.
No. The floor is all yours today. Actually, my PhD is in speech and language.
Oh, I'm so blessed to have you here. Thank you. Thank you. I can't wait.
I was looking forward to this because I really believe that communication is a very important thing, and
absolutely.
It's lovely that you're doing this for us.
Thank you. No, it's my pleasure, really.
I deal more when it breaks down.
I see. Can you tell me a little bit more about what?
No, when people lose their speech due to a stroke or due to a brain tumor or a head injury, rehabilitating them. In my PhD thesis, my focus was on multilingualism and its influence on these problems. How does a person recover? Which language do they recover first? Why do they, choose to recover in that language? So those were the kind of things that.
Amazing. I love looking at the academics of everything that becomes practical strategies and implementation. So I'd love to read more about what you've done.
And one of the things that we found was that almost every Indian is multilingual.
Fascinating. Okay.
All of us speak more than one language.
Yeah.
Besides English, some of us speak even 3 other languages. And so when speech breaks down, it's a very fascinating thing to see why which language breaks down and why we recover from. So I did something called task-oriented use. And I think everybody in the group will agree that we sometimes use different languages for different tasks. Many people will count in the vernacular. They may think in English, but when they count, they break into the vernacular. Agreed, girls?
Absolutely.
Just wanted to let you know so that there are more participants who joined.
Hi,
okay, great.
Maybe you could all say a hi to our speaker today, just to know her before we start the session. We have Rachna, we have Shilpa. Just say hi, Shilpa.
Hi.
We have
Hi, good evening.
Hi, how are you?
Hi.
Very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. I'm so excited to meet all of you, and I'm really happy that this is a Zoom session as opposed to a webinar. I've done a number of webinars, and for a person who is so passionate about communication, to speak into a camera without any engagement is almost, it goes against every fiber within me. So I'm so excited, and I really encourage you, if you have any burning questions as we're progressing through today, put it in the chat. Put your hand up. I think we're going to go through sort of protocol in terms of how we can ask questions. But I do ask you to please, feel free. This is, as much as I'd love to share information today, I do hope that it'll be very engaging as we're going through, and that we are able to answer any specific questions.
Fantastic. We have Kushali, we have Naina Shah. I think all of you can switch on your video so that Sue has a face and a name. All of you are looking lovely, I guess, this afternoon. All right.
I love smiles. Smiles are so important right now, right? Our nonverbal is so important. And that way I can see if I'm putting you to sleep, if I'm torturing you. I'm scanning all the time. This is what I do. I hope I don't put you to sleep, really.
You must have a large screen in front of you, Sue, to see everyone.
I can only see so many at once, so I have
I
to
know.
control, but that's okay. It's no problem.
Great. This is lovely.
Yes.
So do we start?
We have another 8 minutes to go. It's 3:51. So
Yeah.
maybe.
Great. If anyone has any questions, you all have filled up the questionnaire that Sue had, shared when you all registered. So if there's anything that you want to share with her before she starts her session, please feel free to do so. Because this is when we can interact with her. Later, we'll get into a structured format. Anyone at all?
Three people joined just now. So
I had asked if there are any power words, just like we have power poses.
Right, you did. And we are going to get into that today.
Good, good.
And so I want to thank everyone for taking the time. I actually, believe it or not, shortened, our group questionnaires are much lengthier, and we shortened to just try and get a feel of who's attending today. And it's interesting. We have everyone from, administrators to neurologists to partners, directors, vice presidents, marketing background. We have a vast, diverse group of attendees today. And I personally, when I speak with anyone, everything I do is bespoke. And I try to do that even in a group format, to try and speak directly and with relevance to each of you. So I thank each of you for taking time out of your busy days to complete the questionnaire and for being so candid. And as you'll see, as we're progressing through today, I've integrated what responses we received and to make sure that today is fairly custom and pitched at the right level, and with enough specificity, but not overwhelmingly so, and with enough of a framework so that when you leave today, my hope is that you have some concrete strategies and a different lens through which to approach your communication skills development. So excited to get going. But if anybody has, I do know that there was the power talk versus power pose question, and I will get to that, I promise. But does anybody else have anything they want to maybe share in terms of sensitivities? I'm, sort of in YPO world, we have something called Forum Confidential. I'm not sure how many of you know that, but I would ask that this be a safe space, and that what we share on our call today, we do keep amongst ourselves. I think it'll help us. I'm going to be vulnerable in terms of sharing with you some personal stories, and I would ask that those remain confidential. And if anyone else has anything to share, just to know that we can be open and non-judgmental, not so much confidential, but non-judgmental of each other, because I do view communication skills development as a journey, and it's a very personalized journey. A lot of us have different things that have happened to us over the course of our lives, which have impacted who we are today. And so I hope for this to be more of a conversation that can be personalized to each of you somewhat. Does anybody want to share anything or have any questions? Feel free. I don't bite, so I'm just here to inspire you and hopefully give you a new framework with which to approach your skills development. I promise. I have 4 kids, but I don't bite yet. And no gray hair yet, so I'm okay.
Maybe I'll just say why I'm here.
Yes.
For me, I know for a fact, I've been in the communication world for quite some time. I'm audible, right?
Yes.
You are.
So, there were many things when I tried to answer the questionnaire that you'd put across. It was very, very meaningful. And there's a whole bunch of things that is a complete rewind, which, been there, done that, but sometimes it always slips. And I think this is a good opportunity where we'll sort of get back into understanding what we've forgotten. And I also am now in a lot of other spaces where I know my communication is like absolute key. And I'm sure that this session I'll be taking back a lot more. So I come with an open mind and looking forward to what you're going to be sharing.
Thank you. Absolutely. Yeah, I do approach communication skills development with, a step 1, which is the commitment to focus and develop it with intention. And so I love the fact that it made you, the questions are intended to help you stop in your tracks, be present, and really look inward. So does anybody else want to share? I think it was lovely to hear that reflection. Does anybody else want to say, you have nothing better to do today, and so you've shown up. Often I'll say, "Oh, you didn't bring the breakfast," but I can't even say it's for food, right? The Indians love to eat. I can't even bribe you with food. So something in the in the very short sort of promo call to you. Would anybody like to share?
Shilpa, go ahead. Shilpa?
Shilpa, you want to say, or
yeah.
I just wanted to say something.
Yeah, sure, please.
I think communication is such an important thing today. And if you're not able to convey what you feel, because it's how you put the right words at the right place, is so important. And I thought that getting an opportunity like this in a platter at home couldn't have been better. And that's why I'm here and so awaiting what inputs you give, because I thought I was good, but when I was reading the questionnaire, I realized that I was stumped at many places. So thank you for giving us this opportunity, Rinku, and thank you, Sue, for letting us into the journey of communication.
Absolutely, with pleasure. Thank you.
Hi, this is Shilpa. I just wanted to say, given the times that we live in, everybody is on their smartphones, their iPads, looking at emails, WhatsApp messages constantly. So the ability to get your message across in, say, 5 words or less would be such a blessing.
Absolutely.
True.
Absolutely. And you know what we'll get into towards the latter half of today is because of this wonderful thing that connects us, yet quite ironically disconnects us. It impacts our audience and the attention span which our audience has for us. And so, there was a lot of reflections about wanting to be structured and concise and how do I be engaging and impactful, and we'll get into that. But what's really important to know is that we do have an uphill battle, because our brains and those who we're interacting with, everyone's brains are rewired to be distracted. And so it's I believe if we take a scientific approach to this and understand ourselves, then it'll really it's within our control. It's not the traditional belief that it is not within our control. In our control.
Thank you.
I think
anyone else before we start? One more person can go ahead. Any insights?
Hi, this is Guneet.
Hi, Guneet.
Hi. I just wanted to, I'm sorry I missed the initial part of the discussion, but I felt that communication is also knowing when not to speak. We always speak that communication is all about putting your point across, but sometimes very effective communication is when you don't say anything. And many a times I have benefited a lot by keeping quiet and communicated correctly. So another facet of communication for me.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And it's so true, being able, and what we find is if we look at how the brain works, sometimes we question, and it came up in a lot of the answers for the questionnaire, a lot of us are worried about forgetting what we have to say. And so a lot of times we just feel the rush to share our message. And so learning how to hold our thoughts and have confidence in our message by controlling our physiology is actually how we are able to have more control over the message. And we'll get into that today. So I think we're just at the start of our session. Maybe I will be quiet for a moment and we can have a formal opening, and then we'll get into some our official torture session, as I like to call it.
Okay.
Sue, I just sent you a message. If you could take a look at that while we just start off the proceedings. And
yeah, I'll start. Okay. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the first of our knowledge series, which is actually intimate workshops, which we have created and curated for our members to really upskill ourselves, to bring us, make us more aware of who we are, what our strengths are, and what we need to do to make ourselves better versions of what we are today. And I think, Sue, we are really happy to have you as the first person. I must say, when I reached out to Sue, you know what, I'm part of this organization and we'd love to do this workshop. And it was just yes, yes, yes from then on. So thank you again. It really means a lot to have you here. And just a brief reminder that we are streaming this workshop live on Facebook. So while the sharing can be deep, let's also be aware that it is something on a public platform, right? It doesn't take away from anything that we're going to learn today, but maybe we can't promise the confidentiality that we had spoken about it. So yes, we're all here, raring to go, Sue, and I'll now hand over to Prasanna, who will take us through some tech etiquettes through the entire workshop, and then let's start.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Sue. So quickly, let's go through the tech etiquette. We'll all keep our mics muted, and when the speaker is, addressing us. And if you have any questions, please share it. Just put it up on the chat, and we'll see to that that we get to it and they are answered. And if any of the questions aren't answered, we will be getting back to it later, and we will email the answers to you. And if you have any questions and you want to talk to the host, please raise your hand. There is a feature called raise hand. Just click on that, and the moderator, Priya, will get to you, and she'll unmute you, and you will be able to ask our speaker the questions that you want to ask. And in the meantime, please feel free, please keep posting your questions on the chat as well, because we'll be reviewing that, consolidating it, and giving it to the speaker. So that's it. Without further ado, I'm passing it over to Priya.
Thank you very much, Rinku, and thank you, Prasanna. I have the honors to introduce the speaker today. Thank you for that. So, Sue, I'm so happy and honored to introduce you today. Su Bridgman is a lawyer and a CEO of Speak Fluence Global. Yes. She inspires future leaders to speak with influence and lead with impact. She specializes in the development of communication intelligence in the personal, academic, professional context. Sue has been selected by the Forbes books as the communication industry specialist. Speak Fluence integrates positivity, psychology, strategies to nurture individuals to control anxiety and nervousness and activating their innate potential. So here's the audience for you, Sue. Let me begin with a little question about, what is Speak Fluence?
So Speak Fluence is an organization which I started a number of years ago. I was, as noted, a commercial litigator. And I think it's important to understand the journey of how Speak Fluence came to be. So I am some of you might be confused by my name. My name is actually Shutopa Karmakar. I'm Bengali by background, and I have transformed into Su Bridgman. So it's very confusing when people look at me and I start speaking Bengali. I am Bengali by background. I'm a first generation Canadian though. And my father, who was a lawyer back in India, he had, had me in Canada and raised me to really learn to use my voice to impact society. And as you could imagine, being a first generation Canadian, I believed the way to do that was to become a lawyer. And so I did. I was a commercial litigator. And through that journey, I learned that it's wonderful to represent clients and be the voice of clients and to promote their interests. But what's more powerful is to empower individuals to have that voice and to really learn that voice is power. And so I developed Speak Fluence. And if I can slowly, just quickly share my screen, I'm going to get into it here. What I did was I created Speak Fluence, which was intended originally to work with organizations to help their leaders, be they CEOs or partners or women who they're recruiting, to really learn how to develop verbal and nonverbal communication skills. And through that process, what I learned is that I can teach academic verbal communication and nonverbal communication, but what people don't have is physiological control. After working with thousands and thousands of people, I realized that if you don't have physiological control over your inner self, it really doesn't matter how many skills you're taught. They just don't come to the surface. And so we are often taken on by groups such as Moms at Work, Women at Work, and other ACA, the Women's Finance Division of ACA, and we're trying to help women and even Deloitte. I mean, what we do is we nurture women who are going up through leadership positions and try to encourage them to learn technical but also to learn how to control their physiology of anxiety and nervousness, which is a huge factor in our ability to communicate. And in this process, before I get into anything technical, I think it's important to understand why I am so supportive of your organization and other women's organizations, because when I look at my personal inspiration, it's my 4 daughters. And I know how important it is to give girls voice. I know how important it was for me and my legacy, and for my, to do something out of passion. It really is important for me to make sure that they are inspired. Now, while I have my own 4 girls, I work with women's organizations and as board advisors to help other girls. So we have, for example, in Uttarakhand, there's a school called Educate Girls Globally, and Speak Fluence works with them to help them develop voice. And what we're really trying to do is work with, starting with the younger generation, and in addition to supporting corporate organizations, to really help girls around the world and women around the world find their passion to speak and share innovation, to share their positions in boardrooms, but to really take it beyond the boardroom and to become their maximum potential self. So with Girl Scouts and Girl Guides, we're working with 1.1 million girls to develop leadership programs. So these are some of the applications where we're starting when children are young and really working our way up to support professionals, which is what we're going to be getting into today, as all of you have joined us. As I mentioned, some people joined late, but we do have a very diverse group attending today. And the diverse group ranges from partners, directors, vice presidents, marketing background, neurology, and we have about 48% of our attendees have been in the workforce less than 7 years, and about 15% have been 8 to 10 years, and 37% have been over 11 years. And I asked that question specifically because we're each at a different point in our professional communication development journey, and we each have different goals which result from our need to develop these skills. So I want you to think of today as your personal puzzle, and you're trying to grab elements of that puzzle that apply to you in this point of your professional journey. And as we're going through today, I'd like for you to as well remember that the goal of becoming a CQ master is to become an authentic speaker. And a lot of people say, I'm speaking, and I came up in the survey as well, I'm speaking, but I just feel like people don't believe that I'm being authentic and that I am really owning my message. And what I hope is that once you go through what I call a 3-step process, that 3-step process is what will empower you to know that you can speak with full control, mind, body, voice. And so I'm going to ask you to get geeky with me today. First, we're going to master our mindset. Second, we're going to master our body. And third, we're going to master our voice. Those are the 3 steps: MBV, mind, body, voice. And I will put in some elements of science. I'm not going to overcomplicate it, but I'll try to make things make sense because it really is science driven. And I want you to see that perspective. Very quickly, just to know how it's going to be bespoke and why you took all that time out to do the survey, it's important to know that only 34% of attendees today have any previous communication training. And so I'm going to be pitching it at a level where, we get the right level of information going out for everybody. The communication skills, only 27% felt their communication skills were strong. 73% said they're 3 to 7, which is quite low. Confidence levels are overall, quite high, which I love to see. And there's a high level of focus on self-development. Now, what was really interesting was when the question was asked, do you know what communication intelligence is? 65% no, but of the 35% who said yes, it actually wasn't correct. And so I'm going to demystify what people think communication intelligence is and to give you step-by-step of what you can do in terms of a framework to start thinking about how to put together your CQ puzzle. And it's same thing with vocal image. There was 74% said, no, you don't know what it is. And of the people who thought they knew what it is, they actually didn't have the right answer. And I'm not surprised because these are new concepts. These are concepts that I've developed in the last couple of years, and you're all very honest. You can go Google it and check it. You just decided to give your honest sort of read as to what you believed it was. So the bottom line is there's a lot to learn. And so in terms of what people felt what is CQ, generally people felt that it had to be with the capability to communicate, or do people understand what I am saying? It's more technical. Are people actually allowing me to be viewed as, are people viewing me to be intelligent? Do I have EQ? Do I have an ability to pick up verbal and nonverbal cues? These were the general things that people were saying they believed CQ were. But in fact, CQ goes beyond what everyone thinks. Everyone thinks communication is just about verbal and nonverbal communication, and it's not. What it is a series of other elements. So in addition to your verbal and nonverbal communication skills, you have to have what's called a communication growth mindset. So, there was that question about how do you identify yourself? Are you an introvert, extrovert? Do you adapt based on your situation? A lot of times, if you look at psychological labeling theory, if there are any psychologists in the group, you'll know about this. If you look at psychological labeling theory, we often just start believing in the labels we place on ourselves. And I'd like for us, I'm going to go a little bit into growth mindset today and how that will help you change your current mindset about your ability to develop communication skills. Secondly, you need to have what I refer to as communication grit. And grit is a topic which has been highly researched in the last decade. And it is out of our positive psychology arena. I'm the regional representative for the International Positive Psychology Association. And we talk a lot about how you need to be a goal-setting driven individual who is really gritty, as we say, who is very disciplined in developing any skill in order to see measurable results. And that's what we want. Communication is generally considered a soft skill. And the hardest thing about measuring communication is the lack of ability to measure improvement. And what I want to do is to inspire you to try and actually start developing a measurement for yourself through your personal puzzle. The fourth thing is we need to have physiological control of our personal state of nervousness. And as we'll see today, it's different for everybody. And when we are able to have the first four, only then can we start impacting our audience through an understanding of the neurochemistry of language. And when we have all of these 5 elements, then we can start working towards developing what I like to refer to as a flow state. Flow state is, again, a psychological term where you can literally feel like you can turn, I like to say, you can turn this ability to have your communication skills on and off, because a lot of us are introverts by nature, and it actually requires more energy for us to turn on our ability to speak and to interact with an audience. So how can you actually do something what's called extemporaneous speech? And that's what I specialize in, extemporaneous speech. How do you be concise, to the point, intelligible, persuasive under pressure while controlling your physiology of anxiety and nervousness? Does that sound like something? Just quick check-in. Is that something that anybody struggles with? Can I just stop for a moment? I'm going to pause my share here. Is that something which people struggle with at all?
Sometime, yes, sometime.
Yes?
Yeah.
Can I get a raise of hands? Can we get a raise of hands to see, is that something which people struggle with? Yes? We do find, yeah, I see lots of hands up. Thank you. So what I'd like for you to do is know that today is not about changing your intrinsic self. Today is really about you learning how to change your approach to communication and then learn how to switch on your skills. I like to say Netflix on demand. We have Netflix. Everyone in Corona time is, Netflix binging. I want it to be your new Netflix switch, okay? It's going to be your fluent switch, as I like to call it. So I hope that resonates with you. Next, when we look at what were your challenges and what brought you today, a lot of you referred to the need to have content, to structure, to not be rambling, not over explaining. And there's a desire to be crisp and persuasive, There's a desire to be concise, manage your time, and plan the order in which you say things. And when we looked at the other elements, if I can just direct you here to the screen, when we look at those challenges, what we'll learn today is that there are 3 parts to your communication. You have your verbal communication skills, which are quite academic. I can teach you those out of a textbook. But then when you have the 93% of your communication message and impact, which is comprised of your articulation, elocution, prosody, your projection, your nonverbal communication, your anxiety, your nervousness, that's the bulk of how you're received in your communication message. And so what I've highlighted here in purple are the words that each of you shared in terms of what your challenges are. So overcoming or hiding nervousness, not looking nervous, anxiety, fear, and wanting to be confident, managing high stress levels, keeping audience attention and engagement, reading and communicating based on others' emotions, and controlling my own emotions and physiological blushing, to be authentic when speaking on non-subject matter expert topics, being extemporaneous, having memory, remembering facts, being memorable, and then body language and not being self-conscious. So if you look at what's in purple, those are not, it's not saying, give me a to-do, how do I fix this? These different purple elements are the elements that you will be able to achieve when you develop CQ, not just simple communication skills. Simple communication skills, technical academic ones, are in black. And those are things which are easily taught. The other ones are the ones which are more challenging. Does that make sense to everybody? Yes? Good?
Sue, I think they're not able to see the screen. There's some message coming in. The screen isn't visible.
Ah, okay.
Maybe did you stop the share and then start the share?
I will start the share again. Absolutely. My pleasure. Can everyone see that now?
Yes,
I can see.
Okay, excellent. I'm sorry about that. Okay, we had a problem with the share, no worries. So I'll just very quickly, I won't repeat everything, but whatever's in purple, these are words that came out of your surveys in terms of what you would like to improve. And those things are those are the elements you improve when you master your CQ. Everything else is academic. And it is something which, as I was saying, you could teach out of a book, or you probably have heard about verbal communication skills, nonverbal communication skills. And I actually have formulas where you learn how to how you develop your content and how you structure. These are literacy skills where you learn about persuasive modes and rhetorical questions and how to use pathos, logos, ethos, and kairos, which has been used for 2,000 years in order to be really persuasive speakers. That is academic. What I would like to focus on is working on how do you get to the purple level, the mastery of this CQ. And if we look at goals, this is just a word cloud of what everybody wants to achieve in terms of their communication skills. And so that is what's going to drive today and what we're looking at. So we see a lot of people want confidence. They want to be engaging, impactful, emotion-driven, have effective body language, be succinct. These are all the words that came out from your different survey results. So in order to be structured and make sure we manage our time, what I'd like to do is divide today into 2 elements. The first is CQ in relation to yourself. And the second is CQ in relation to your audience. And when I say audience, it could be you're at a boardroom table. It could be you're in a negotiation. It could be you're speaking with your spouse. It could be that you're talking with your girlfriend. It could be anything. Audience is a broad term where you are trying to impact how someone is listening to you. And when we look at CQ in relation to ourselves, I'm going to be looking at this in terms of 5 elements. We're going to look at obstacles. So what's actually getting in our way of developing it? A lot of us say we're going to get to it. I want to do it. It's something I want to improve, but we don't actually get to it. And then strategies for mastery. And how can this be your personal currency and superpower? It's really something which is beautifully available to you if you activate it. Then we're going to look at CQ in terms of your audience and how do we actually engage others. And this is something, I mean, so we, just so you know, we do individual sessions on each of these, but I will give you a framework and I hope that you put them together and you apply them. And then we can try, you know, in the future, perhaps to look at individual sections in more detail. But it's important for you to understand how it all fits together as a puzzle. So if you can remember this one quote, I think it's so, and you know, we have a very self-aware group. That's what I learned through our through our survey. And I want us to use that to our benefit and to our advantage. So knowing others is intelligence, knowing yourself is true wisdom, mastering others is strength, but mastering yourself is true power. And when I say that our voices are power, I want you to think of a fact. The fact is that if you have a negative first impression, which you make within the first 10 seconds of meeting someone, maybe 15 seconds if you have lucky, on average 7 to 10 seconds, it will take 11 encounters to undo that negative first impression. And there's a reason for that. It's because our brains are tuned to protect us. And whether we know it or not, our brains are sending us messages on whether we trust people or don't trust people. And when we look at how we're communicating, our first step towards that goal of ingraining trust in our audience is to be mindful of 3 elements of communication. And that is our spoken words, our tone, and it's simplified here, I'm going to break it out a little more, and our nonverbal communication. And while most of us think that our spoken words are the bulk of our communication message, it's actually only 7%. The 7% we give must be concise, precise, driven, persuasive, structured, and use the proper language which engages our audience, but it's still only 7%. The balance is 93%, which is combined of these 2 blocks of communication drivers. And when I ask you to look at our goal setting and what I would like for you to start thinking of in terms of your personal goal setting and your puzzle, when we look at our words, can everyone see my cursor that I'm placing over? Yes, yes, okay. So when we look at our words, I'm just gonna guide you to column 1. If you can be structured in your brain even and start thinking about your goals in each of these columns. Structure is only 7% under this, the words column or the content. And that in layman's speak is what you say. So 7% of your communication is what you say. 93% here, 93% is how you say it. And when we look at the how you say it, that is broken down into these various elements. And this is why when we looked at your goals and your challenges, the bulk of the challenges actually arise from this section of our goal setting. And that is why I ask that you make sure your goal setting is driven towards very academic speech, but at the same time, always bearing in mind, how do you layer your vocal variety and your nonverbal communication and your physiology of anxiety and nervousness? And once you have those elements, you start developing a state of flow across these 3 types or 3 elements of your communication. And I like to use, if you want to make a note of the phrase communication congruence, it's really important for us to think about, we could be sharing a message, but there are a lot of concerns in the survey about, am I authentic? And am I actually perceived to be authoritative? Congruence is when your verbal speech, your verbal message matches your vocal variety. So the tone you use, the projection, the pause, the modulation, where all of those also match your nonverbal communication. So I'm quite sad at the state of today's pandemic communication because we are all losing 55% of our communication message. I have no opportunity to interact with you. I'm looking into camera. I can't look you in the eye. I hope you feel connected with me. This is not normal human communication. Human communication and our need to connect with individuals is really based upon that 55%. So as you're interacting in pandemic days, I want you to remember that while this formula is for human interaction in person, when you're interacting online, you really will have to focus more on your vocal variety, your words being very concise, and bearing in mind which words, as we'll learn in a bit, which words create trust or create distrust in your audience due to the hormonal impact of the words that you choose. That's where we're headed in a bit, okay? Do I need to check in? Is everybody following? Am I going too fast or is this okay? Is the pace all right? Yes? Good, thumbs up? All right, good. So when I look at when we talk about communication congruence, if you can give yourself, for the content, just to be really easy and for you to remember in terms of goals, what you're hoping to achieve is to be CAPSI, okay? CAPSI is you want to be clear, authoritative, precise, concise, and impressive. And anytime you are finding vocabulary which related to your profession, you know, we have everything from marketing to private, to private family business, to neurology. I mean, we have so many different professions here. But whatever your industry, you want to be very much sort of directed to finding content which show that your vocal image, that the words you're choosing are goal directed to being CAPSI. When we try to then start thinking about self-awareness, I'm going to start asking you to start looking at your mindset. And when I say step one is mindset, I can give you books and books of things to, you know, items or to-dos and, research to read and exercises to do. But if your mindset isn't to the point where you believe you can change the label of whether you're introvert, extrovert, it depends. Unless you're willing and open to change that mindset, you will have a bit of an uphill struggle developing your communication skills. So my invitation to you is to give yourself a hardware update, to learn. If there's a book I can recommend, I would recommend a book called Growth Mindset by Carol Dweck. She's a professor out of Stanford, and she has done research on neuroplasticity and neurogenesis. And they've done a lot of research. I mean, I put up the London map here. There was research done where the taxi drivers in London, they are given a test where they need to learn the whole London map, and they need to learn all the different pathways or routes, and also the landmarks that they need to get their customers to. And after tracking these London taxi drivers over the course of 2 years, what they found is that their brains grew in connections based on their exercising of that skill, exercising their brain in respect of that skill. And what neuroplasticity is all about is that you should know that if you put your mindset towards developing your communication skills, your brain will actually develop more connections in that space. I'm trying to put it very simply, in that space. And how you react to communication scenarios can either be fearful driven or action driven based on your mindset and based on the words you use to approach communication settings. And so with that, what I'd like to do is, if I can, hopefully this works, is show you a very short video about what neuroplasticity is and give you a bit of a primer on this because it's quite fascinating. So I'll just put this on. It's only about a couple minutes.
Not so long ago, many scientists believed that the brain did not change after childhood, that it was hardwired and fixed by the time we became adults. But recent advances in only the last decade now tell us that this is simply not true. The brain can and does change throughout our lives. It is adaptable, like plastic. Hence, neuroscientists call this neuroplasticity. How does neuroplasticity work? If you think of your brain as a dynamic, connected power grid, there are billions of pathways or roads lighting up every time you think, feel, or do something. Some of these roads are well-traveled. These are our habits, our established ways of thinking, feeling, and doing. Every time we think in a certain way, practice a particular task, or feel a specific emotion, we strengthen this road. It becomes easier for our brains to travel this pathway. Say we think about something differently, learn a new task, or choose a different emotion. We start carving out a new road. If we keep traveling that road, our brains begin to use this pathway more, and this new way of thinking, feeling, or doing becomes second nature. The old pathway gets used less and less and weakens. This process of rewiring your brain by forming new connections and weakening old ones is neuroplasticity in action. The good news is that we all have the ability to learn and change by rewiring our brains. If you have ever changed a bad habit or thought about something differently, you have carved a new pathway in your brain and experienced neuroplasticity firsthand. With repeated and directed attention towards your desired change, you can rewire your brain.
All right. And so when we look at how this relates to our communication skills and giving ourselves a hardware update, if you try to change your inner voice, everyone can put a big star next to inner voice, because inner voice is really mindset. And so if you start shifting your approach to a nervous situation with changing it as something you're fearful of, with something you're willing to be challenged by, as an example, we have lists and lists of phrases that you can use, but it's an example where you try to find an action-driven label to relabel what you once viewed as fearful. It is, and you do this in a consistently disciplined fashion, not just one-off, but you do this on a consistent, so you're literally with intention telling yourself, anytime I feel fearful, or anytime I feel overwhelmed, or anytime I feel that I am in a situation where I can't overcome, or I feel intimidated, if you change your wording related to that situation, you can then use that discipline to change your inner reaction to that event. And that links to the next element. And the next element is really growth mindset related to language. So when we talk about inner voice, when you have a fixed mindset, you believe that you are born with a certain skill set, i.e. your communication skills. But when you have a growth mindset, these are the types of phrases that you start integrating into your personal repertoire and in respect of your skills development. The next part that this leads us to is, how do we link that to our personal physiology? And when we look at our physical awareness, we have a highly aware group, which is fascinating because I've done this with thousands of people, and I think you should get gold medals. This is the most highly self-aware group I've ever worked with. I often have people who say, are you aware of physical reactions when speaking? And it's between 5 and 10%. And we actually have a highly, highly aware group of people today. And one thing that people don't do is monitor their heart rate. So what I'd like to give you as a to-do is to start monitoring. First of all, does everybody know how to find their heart rate? Yes? Does everybody know? So what I'd like you to do is we're not going to do it together today. It'll just take away because our time is limited. But just as a to-do, can you please start monitoring what is your heart rate at resting, your resting heart rate? So when you're relaxed, you're having a cup of tea or, having some jalebi and just chilling, just relaxing. What are you like when you're just really in control of yourself? And then if you have something which is happening to you, which is stressing you, maybe you even have a Fitbit or, Apple Watch or whatever, just start trying to become more mindful of how is your heart rate changing in stressful situations. And what the goal of a CQ program or CQ development is to make sure that your stressed heart rate is more in line with your resting heart rate. And so you're trying to develop through the exercises that we do on a daily basis, we're trying to develop an awareness and a physiological control of your stressed heart rate to bring it more in line with your resting heart rate. Does that seem achievable, or does that sound like it's crazy to you guys? I'm just going to stop here because some people think, wow, like you are asking a lot of me. You're a crazy woman. I just want to stop and ask, who thinks I'm crazy? Do you think you could do that? Somebody? Engagement? Somebody unmute? I want someone to give me their, gut reaction. Yes, Rachna.
I haven't understood what you actually mean by bringing your heart rate, because I thought it was involuntary. I mean, it's not that we can control it. It just happens because your heart beats that way. So I have not really understood that.
Let me give you, okay, thank you. So just to clarify this, so what we're going to get into next is our body, when our heart rate is elevated, it elevates if we're nervous or anxious about something. And once our heart rate is involuntary, it's engaged by the parasympathetic system, but that happens very much in terms of the same way if we exercise, our heart rate goes up. I want you to just start learning what it feels like when your heart rate is elevated, and then monitor. Maybe you're in a confrontational situation. Just start monitoring, is my heart rate likewise increasing in those situations? So the first step is just being aware of, is your heart rate elevating as it would be in a stressed or exercise induced state? So if I was with you, I would perhaps have you do squats. I won't make all of you do squats, but my CEOs are sitting there doing squats with me. We're trying to elevate, right? Just to understand heart rate up, heart rate down. And then we're trying to figure out, what do I feel when heart rate is up? What do I feel when heart rate is down? And the reason for this is that we're trying to bring mind-body awareness to an elevated heart rate, because that is what's happening involuntarily when we're speaking in stressful situations. Does that make sense now? And my goal is that for you to be extemporaneous. Extemporaneous doesn't mean scripted. It means you could be in any situation and you can access your communication skills, your message, your pitch, whatever it might be, on the spot under pressure. And so we're looking at that X factor, if you will, in terms of having physiological control. Because if your heart rate is elevated and you're in a cortisol fight or flight response state, what happens is you cannot access the language and the structure and all the academic skills which we try to develop as speakers. Does that make sense to everybody? Yeah, okay. And so what I would usually do, I think we will not do this, but I'm gonna ask you maybe just to make a note. Take 30 seconds and make a note. If you look at yourself, just draw a stick person, because we're not able to share a screen. Just make a note and ask yourself, where do I feel, if I do a head-to-toe assessment, where do I feel some physiological response in my body when I am stressed, anxious, nervous? And when I do this I've done these webinars across the world, and it's fascinating because this will become covered with people from all over the world, circling different parts of their body where they're having a physiological response. We're not able to access that activity today, unfortunately. But if you do take a mindful moment to do that, you'll see that we are actually connected as human beings in our own individual ways to have a physiological response to stress. And some people will say my palms sweat. Some people will say, my knees wobble. Some people will say my voice goes hoarse. There are different physiological responses. Some people say my head itches. I had one girl, she literally had scales that appeared on her body because for some reason, and I didn't believe her. And then I saw it happen before my eyes. Everyone has their own physiological response to stress. And once you understand what yours is, you can then start learning about the physiology of anxiety and nervousness and start working towards putting those words that we say. These are the words that come out of physiological anxiety. And once you understand these words, they're all related to what's happening through our involuntary reaction to our body. Yeah. So I know we have one neurologist with us today, so this is going to be very basic, but I do think that most of us don't have a sense, sorry, my screen is moving. Most of us don't have a sense of how the brain works. And so what I'd like to do is just give you a quick primer on the 3 parts of the brain that we need to think about. Sorry, this is going the wrong way. Just a minute, sorry about this. So what I'd like to do is just give you a quick primer on the 3 regions of the brain, and then we'll learn about how this actually impacts our stress state.
While the brain is our most complex organ, its main objective is simple: to keep us alive and achieve our goals. It does this by helping us breathe, eat, walk, and talk, the basic essentials to our survival. It is geared to search for any dangers in our environment.
Sorry, why did that happen? Apologies, this is... just a minute, please. I don't know why it's doing this. Okay, there we go.
While the brain is our most complex organ, its main objective is simple: to keep us alive and achieve our goals. It does this by helping us breathe, eat, walk, and talk, the basic essentials to our survival. It is geared to search for any dangers in our environment and primes us to respond quickly. What's more, our brain gives us the ability to plan ahead, solve problems, experience emotions, store memories, and communicate with others, all the things that make us human. Our brain is the control center of our entire body, driving our every thought, feeling, and action. Just how do our brains do this? There are three main regions within the brain that serve a specific function as we interact with our environment. At the base of our brain is the primitive region, in the middle, the feeling region, and at the front and top of our brain is the thinking region. While these three regions have their own special function, they operate as one connected network to keep us alive and reach our goals. The primitive region of our brain looks after those basic life functions that just happen automatically, like our breathing and heart rate. It also helps coordinate our basic physical movements, such as our balance and posture. More than this, it plays a key role in scanning our environment to search for those things that may threaten our chances of survival. This helps the instinctual part of our brain kick into action automatically. The middle feeling region of our brain plays a significant part in our emotional and social experiences through life. This is the part of our brain where emotions and impulses, such as anger, fear, and pleasure come from. It is activated when our primitive region detects a threat in the environment and triggers our fight or flight response. This region drives many of our behaviors and habits and helps us form memories and attach feelings to them, particularly when we experience strong feelings such as fear or happiness. Lastly, the thinking region is the largest and most highly developed part of the human brain. It stores our memories, allows us to plan, enables us to imagine or analyze a situation, find a solution, and communicate with others. It is the part of the brain where we can take control of decision-making and emotion and override our automatic responses from our primitive and feeling regions. Our thinking region gives us our likes, dislikes, hopes, and ambitions, those things that make us uniquely human and different to all other animals on this planet. These three regions of the brain work together to coordinate our every thought, feeling.
Okay. So when we look at how that relates to our communication, what has happened over time is that we are starting to view, and generally speaking, people are viewing communication as the snake or as the dinosaur. And we have this cortisol response, which is being instigated in our body, causing our heart rates to increase. And it's very personal and it's extremely instinctive, but it's being engaged by whatever it is that, that is personal to you. And what we need to do then is to look at how do we learn exercises to overcome the control or to develop a control over that physiological response. That's something which we need to work towards developing. But the other side that's really important is that likewise has an impact on, that likewise has an impact on the language that we're using. And what happens is when we're speaking to people, we are looking at 4 elements, and there are certain things that are within the structure of how we structure our words. There is the element in relation to the tone, and there's the element in relation to how we're perceived based on the language and the vocabulary. And then what happens is there's the words that we use, it actually can instigate that distrust, that fear response, or that protective response which arises out of the amygdala. And what we want to do is actually instigate a trusting relationship through the language we use, which is what we're trying to do is actually instigate and initiate oxytocin, which is released by the prefrontal cortex. And all of us can remember, when it's called the cuddle hormone, or if we've had kids and we first have that, it's a bonding hormone. So what we want to do is actually use vocabulary which instigates oxytocin and decreases the cortisol, which is our body's natural way of protecting ourselves. And when we're doing this, we should also remember that there is something called an attention reset button within our audience. And as I mentioned at the beginning, some of you joined late, but I'll just mention it again. Due to digital distraction, our audience actually has a very short attention span. And so through the tone and through different modes of delivery, we need to make sure that we're resetting their attention button, as we call it. And the way to do that is through the structure. And so this is an example of a structure where we could, if you have a speech to do, for example, we could use this kind of a breakdown. And we would, within this breakdown, try to find specific language relevant to your industry or your position or your audience, figure out how to actually write down to the 10 or 15 seconds to time your speech accordingly, and then to look at it in chunks and where are we re-cueing the audience. Now here you'll see this is more so for a longer speech. I would say nowadays you have, if you're fortunate, 7 minutes. The fact that we're doing a lengthy webinar, it's not easy to engage over long periods of time. And this is a little bit different. Generally speaking, you have a very short attention span, which you can expect from your audience. And so what we try to do is time ourselves to deliver short messages. And if we look here at what's happening in the brain, we have cortisol, which is, and there's I didn't want to overload you with videos, but there's if you look up fight or flight response, you can do it in your own time, and you'll see how when you have a fight or flight response, cortisol is induced within your body. And when you have oxytocin induced, that's actually where it's induced when you have words that are trusting or inspiring, or where you're indicating safety or empathy. And so if you're in an organization where you're trying to give your new leadership vision, for example, the words you choose should include those different elements. The other element, there's some trouble with this, I apologize, this keeps going ahead. The other thing which I can give to you as a takeaway is the acronym or mnemonic called AMUSI. So if you want to think of the 5 steps that you need to engage in order to engage with your audience, you want to activate their neurochemistry using trust-inducing language. You want to mindfully up-level their oxytocin, so you're engaging their prefrontal cortex. You want to understand the neurochemical impact of your stress state and safe state and how you can engage that within your audience. And always remember, I like to view it as a bit of a seesaw. And so you're trying to down level your cortisol and up level the oxytocin. And there's something called the neuroception of language and safety through language. And that's really what we're trying to do. We're trying to engage from a neurological perspective the audience to feel that they can trust us, that we are authoritative, and that they are safe with our message, and that we are not threatening them, provided that's a context. I mean, if you're in a negotiation and you need to be aggressive, that's a different context. I'm just saying, generally speaking, if you're trying to inspire trust, etc., this is the way to do it. And there's something which I can direct you to called appreciative inquiry. Anybody heard of appreciative inquiry? It's quite popular. It's positive psychology based. And there's a fantastic professor, David Cooper-Ryder, and he's done a ton of work. So he works with Microsoft and the Navy and governments around the world to try and teach how do you use appreciative inquiry language in order to inspire effective organizations. And so I'd love to direct you to the Cooper Writer Center as well, if that might be something that is relevant to you. I won't get into too much detail because we have entrepreneurs, we have, a diverse group of people. But what's really different is that when you're inquiry based, you are really having conversations that are meaningful in your tone, they're engaging, they're really trying to generate information and knowledge, and they're really solutions based, they're energizing and they're productive. And the opposite would be affirmative conversations where they're more positive emotions, they're non-directional, they're much more acknowledgement, positive advocacy. It's a little bit, different in terms of how you come across. And to be honest, it could be a matter of a few words. But if you can remember, in terms of your goal and wanting to be appreciative rather than depreciative, there's two ways. You can be inquiry-based and statement-based, but the way you phrase your content and create your content should always be inquiry and statement-based. That is appreciative rather than depreciative. And so what I'd like to do is, I've given you an overview of the puzzle. Now I'd like to guide the balance of our time together to see how do you put together your personal CQ puzzle, and how does this relate to you, and how can I guide you, a few of you at least in our remaining time, to put what we've talked about today and make it relevant to you. You'll notice I did not get into specifics on how to structure, how to improve your tone, how to improve your nonverbal communication. Those are technical skills which are specific to each of you and your industries and your points in your personal communication skills journeys. So what I'd like to do is, if there's something which you'd like out of what we've covered today to have that applied to, I'd love to see how I can support you more individually in the next balance of the session. Does anybody have any questions?
Hi, Sue.
Hello.
Hi.
Sana.
Prasanna here, but I just like to actually ask again what Dr. Preetika had asked you before about the power words to alter the mood, and just like how power poses work to alter the state.
Absolutely. So so what we do is we actually have lists of words, and they're very industry relevant. I think what's important to know is that language does impact neurochemistry. I think that's the message I want to give today. Specific words, it's not a matter of specific words. There are lists and lists of words. It's called power talk, right? And the relevance to different industries, we would be here all day if we're talking about specific language. But does it impact? Yes, it does. How does it impact? It impacts based on your choice of language. And so if you want to be more trust-inducing, then you're using trust-inducing language. If you're trying to shift mindset, if someone comes to you and they say, if you're perhaps trying to inspire growth mindset within a team member, and they say, I've had it. I just can't deal with our team. I'm at my wit's end. For you as a leader, for example, to turn it around and inspire trust by saying, I can see you're feeling challenged. I can see that you're having some difficulty with our team members. Let's have a conversation and see how to, in a very structured fashion, what are the 3 things that we can create as between you and I to ensure that your concerns are met. And again, it's so industry specific, so it's tricky when we have such a diverse group to get into specifics. I'm just giving a general example. But when you use appreciative inquiry-based language and you look at what has worked and how you can build on what's worked. And so you might, for example, in an organization say to a frustrated team, you might say, well, let's look at our milestones. How did we achieve them? What drove that success? And then how do we extrapolate that to our current situation? As opposed to having a reactive, what did you do wrong this time? What did we do wrong? Where did we go off path? As soon as you use that type of language, you're actually instigating a lack of trust in your team or in your audience or in your spouse. But if you're more collaborative and you know what, it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of work to actually think before you speak, because that's what it entails. It entails your physiological control to not be reactive to whoever it is you're interacting with, to be mindful that the language you choose is about to impact, because most people don't know that you're impacting another's neurochemistry based on your language. And the impact, what happens is, because their cortisol response goes up, they are less receptive to what you're saying. And we all have our own spidey sense, as I call it. And when your spidey sense is sensing that person's not trusting, your cortisol starts rising, and then it impacts it's like this fierce cycle. So if you can be authentic in how you're speaking, be mindful in how you are choosing your language, structuring what you're saying, and controlling that physiological response, which we talked about in terms of your elevated heart rate. Once you can do that, your brain actually clears. And so I'll give you an example of, a lot of people think, well, it sounds theoretical. We do this with kids, right? And I know if we can do it with kids, we can do it with adults. We have students who will come in with us. If you want to test yourself, you can give yourself an exercise where you give yourself 1 minute. And in 1 minute, you have to write as many words as you can under time pressure, okay? As soon as I ask you to do that, and we didn't do it because we don't have the technology for it today, but I would usually do it. As soon as I put you under time pressure and tell you to do an exercise like that, your heart rate goes up because you feel the pressure, right? And if I was to then say, great, now you tell me, what did you feel right now in your body? You would all say, you would have that picture of that woman and you'd start circling my head, my ears are burning, my eyes got glassy, my head froze. You have all these things you start feeling. And do you know what? All I did was tell you to write down words, right? I didn't ask you to be in a stressed state, but our brain reacts and our body reacts involuntarily to stressful situations. And so what we do is we train, how do you increase your speech length to decrease that physiological response for extended periods of time, by learning how to be structured in what you say, and then learning how to control your intonation and your volume and projection, and what energy are you putting in your language, and then the nonverbal communication, which we're unable to do today because of our circumstances. And once you have that ability to do all of that, you're then able to, as a package, your power talk works to engage your audience. Did that help, Prasanna?
Yes.
Excellent. Anybody else? We had some questions as well previously. Yeah. I'm not sure who.
I'm trying to open the chat and just see.
Great.
I can go if you want.
Sue, can you close your screen share? We can see you fully on the screen.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's better.
Okay.
Okay, I have a question, Sue.
Yes.
If that's okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so when I'm interacting or speaking from a place of conviction and owning my story, how do I analyze what the other person is going through, or how he or she will respond to me?
Absolutely. So in that circumstance, what I find useful is to learn about other people's personalities. And when I say that we do a module on this, it's literally to know what other personality types are out there, what's your personality type, and how do you adapt to that personality type. And it sounds like a lot of work, it is. But when I say being disciplined and gritty about improving this skill set, it is so vast. And so if you want to react, you're also listening for their cues, their verbal cues. You're monitoring their nonverbal communication. You're monitoring their tone. But if you really want, if you're in an extended conversation or you have an extended interaction with the person, you could do that personality assessment and then look at their 738-55, their verbal, nonverbal communication, and react accordingly.
Great, thank you.
I think Kirtana is having a question. So Kirtana, can you?
So my question is now with pandemic and everything, we're all communicating through Zoom. So how do we make ourselves communicate better through this platform? It could be either we are giving a webinar or having a meeting. So how does this differentiate from communicating in person? So how do we communicate better using these online tools?
So you remember the 3 columns. We had our 7% is our content. Our 38% is our tone, elocution, prosody, modulation. Really, that's what we have available because our nonverbal communication is very limited. We could have some minor hand gestures for nonverbal communication. We could try to have some form of eye contact by looking at the camera, but we really are needing to focus very mindfully on those other 2 elements. So on the other, the other 2 elements of our communication message. So when we talk about our content being structured, so having a clear structure to your message, always start with an introduction. I always say when you speak, you should almost be able to guide people through. Some of us were joking at the beginning when we came on about how we're note takers. If you could almost, if you're a good student, you know how a set of good notes are really. I used to always say I had a good professor when I knew my notes reflected the message well, and I was able to follow them. So if you could prepare in a way where it's structured, so if someone's listening to you, it's organizing the information in their mind in a very structured fashion, that would be an excellent way to maximize your content. In terms of vocabulary choice, I think that you have to be really mindful to not use self-limiting words. One thing we find, we work a lot with partners or people who are being groomed for partnership, women who are being groomed for partnership. And a lot of times they'll use self-limiting words like, well, I had a little bit of an impact, or yeah, I contributed a bit. No, own your role, own your contribution, and make sure that if you said something, don't be shy to promote yourself. I think there's a fear amongst us to say that, oh, we have to be humble. I was raised to be humble, believe me. In Bengali culture, you never talk about what you've done. You never know. You'll know somebody for 40 years. You don't know what they've done because, that's how I was raised. That's what it's like in Canada, at least. I believe in turning that on its head. Own who you are. Don't boast. But if you find the language which shows, like, I'm passionate about what I do. There's a reason I'm passionate. I think people, if you're more of a storyteller, if it's the right environment, again, I don't know what your environment is. In some environments, like I'm working with a management consultant right now, he needs to be so direct in his communication. Whereas I'm working with a CEO who has to be more relationship driven. So it depends on what your purpose is in your communication. If you can be a storyteller, be a storyteller. It works. The brain loves stories and they'll remember you more.
Thank you. So I had one question. Maybe we are all women who are entrepreneurs, somebody who are directors on boards, and holding a good position in what we have in the society. So sometimes we are put to a corner and asked, "Can you give a speech, an extempo?" So I think how do you sort of articulate words referring to the context that where we are? And also to be able to communicate effectively at that point. Some tips on that will actually probably help us to assimilate our way of our style of what we want to present to people.
So extemporaneous speech, just for those who don't know, is the requirement to make a speech on demand without much preparation time. And Priya, can you just tell me, when you say extemporaneously, how much time do you have?
Maybe you're invited for a function. At the beginning of the function, they just come and tell you, say a few words, and you don't know what the few words are. Yeah. But then you still have to say that.
Right.
So maybe 5-7 minutes or even 10 minutes.
Not a lot of time, right? Yeah. So what you're automatically, and this is why I brought up all the chemistry and what's happening in our body, automatically your brain saying, oh my gosh, what am I gonna, your brain, it's not that you're looking beautifully proper and you're sitting there thinking, oh yes, I've got this, no problem. But your body and your brain and your mind is saying, are you kidding me? You want me to come up with a speech in 5 minutes. So what do? When I talk about that switch, you got to turn on the tools. You have to think, what's my content? All right, let me get down my structure, put my structure down. What tone do I want to use? And then, I'm not glossing over the details at all. It is so detailed. We could literally do 2-hour sessions on each column. So I'm giving you the overview, but the structure, you have to get the content, and then you have to think, how am I going to position myself physiologically in order to convey that confidence? And I firmly believe you can speak on any topic only if you are controlling your heart rate and you are controlling your cortisol response, because if your cortisol is rushing, it doesn't matter what your brain has in it, it'll get stuck. You'll get brain fog, right? And so that's why I'm harping on the monitor your heart rate, understand how your personal body works, understand how to decrease. And I know we didn't have time today to get into how to decrease the heart rate. That's, again, it's a whole other session, if you will. But these are to-dos in terms of what you need to achieve. And if you can do that, we have students as young as 9 who can do extemporaneous speech with 3 minutes notice, and beautifully. So if a 9-year-old can do it, you can all do it. It's completely within your control.
Thank you for that. So there's a question coming from Guneet. Guneet, do you want to unmute and ask that question?
So my question was that in today's day and age where webinars seem to be the order of the day, and we as directors need to be in touch with our teams over the internet, how can we communicate and pep them up and make them feeling good? Any to-dos on a webinar event with your team?
Again, if you can think about the 3 columns of communication, you need to energize through your voice. You need to really motivate from a distance, right? When I'm doing webinars, I have people all over the world, different cultures, different ages, different races, you name it. And you have to get your message out there. And so if you can just pretend that the camera is the person and literally not over exaggerate, but be authentic. If you want them to feel your love and your passion, let them feel it. And that comes through your modulation. And it comes from a wholehearted, sort of projection, if you will. And again, when you are, I think, just to take your note and Priya's as well, to be able to do it extemporaneously, if you can prepare in advance what your narrative is, I'm going to give you a phrase called cognitive load. And I know we're running over time. Are we okay for another 5 minutes? I don't want to keep anybody if this is torture. Yes? Okay, good. It's not torture, no. So if you can just remember that there's something called cognitive load. And cognitive load are the number of things you have to think about, okay? What we want to do is decrease our cognitive load. If we decrease our cognitive load, we decrease our self-consciousness. If we decrease our self-consciousness, we increase our confidence and we increase our communication. There's an inverse relationship. And so if you already have your narrative planned, and so one thing we do, for example, is we help people build narratives, right? What words reflect you as individuals? What words are relevant to your industry? And once you have that narrative, that's only step 1. Then it's the rest. How do you add and layer the tone and layer the energy and what emotion? We talk about communication congruence. That's one thing, Guneet. Communication congruence is really important. So you have to know that the words you're choosing in your narrative are matching your physiology to the best that you're able to portray on a camera, and your tone. So if you really are excited, share it. But if you're saying, I'm really excited, and your facial expressions aren't congruent, or if you're saying, I really like that idea, you have to have congruence in your face, in your tone, and in your body language, and in your words. So if you're trying to inspire trust and you're trying to inspire someone to take ownership or initiative, then you are going to have to select words and then layer your tone and your body language over it. Does that make sense? I did it in columns to try and help you visualize that it's not all jumbled. It's literally columns of tools and skills that you are trying to develop, almost like a checklist in each column. You could use that format when you're preparing your speeches. Do it in columns. And then what I like to say is, when you're learning, it's like it's a robotic kind of a system. And then eventually it becomes a flow state and you just appear beautifully. So Priya, when you're called on to do an extempo, you're like, yeah, I got this. And you just show up and you do it. Not all of that disappeared because you have a flow state, and it's empowering. It's so empowering. I'm going to give you one quick story before we take another question. I had to speak at the Opera House, and it was this large event, 3,000 people. And I am Bengali. My Bengali is okay, but my Arabic is non-existent. And there was an Arabic dignitary who was front row center and there to open the event. And I've been doing this for more than 25 years. I'm aging myself. I know I'm pretty good at doing extemporaneous, but this was, I had my narrative planned. I was the MC. I was, guiding everyone through this large event. And I was really self-conscious about how I was going to say his name, because I know he's sensitive about how his name is said. And his name, it's long, right? And I'm really not good when it comes to the, like their accents. It's just not for me. It's not what I'm well versed in. So that automatically increased my cortisol, right? I went in there thinking I got everything, but this one thing is going to be my stickler. And when I talk about a flow state of communication, this is what I'd like to.
Webinar, pa.
Sorry?
Can
we mute the others?
Sorry. It's a webinar, a general webinar.
Can we mute the others, Priya?
Okay. When I talk about a flow state and what I'm asking you to work and strive towards, I was in that moment and I got up there and I could feel, even being well practiced, never perfect, but well practiced. When I watch the video after, I know exactly what happened in the first 11 seconds. And we time speech. This is how we develop our skills. In the first 11 seconds, I could hear on the mic, my mouth got a little sticky. And I could see what that meant was that parasympathetic system had checked in and had, been instigated, because I was self-conscious about that one part of my speech. And I had to make sure that I overcame that. I got a hold of my physiological state and continued and didn't let it impact the rest. And I could actually hear the stickiness on my mic. Nobody else had any clue, but that's how careful I am and how attuned I am to my state. And so when I say self-awareness develops confidence and communication, in that moment, I could actually see myself sitting on the front row of the Opera House, self-correcting, saying, all right, what do you need to do? Go through your pre-presentation list. And this is in a split second, right? Because our parasympathetic system kicks in immediately. And within that time, I was able to decrease my heart rate and content started flowing. And so I know it sounds a bit abstract in some ways, but once you achieve all the different elements, it is a really beautifully and empowering place to be. And the event went off quite well. So with that, any other questions? I know there was a couple of questions. Yes, Jyoti. Yes, you had your hand up.
I'm going to take two more questions. So there's one from Jyoti. And the next one, Shilpa, you can be ready. These are the two questions that I would let them speak. And unmute yourself, Jyoti, if you have to speak.
Yeah, I have. Okay, before I go on to the question, Sue, I'm sure, I'm nervous to look at the Facebook Live, because I think throughout I was smiling and I'm nodding. I'm so happy that I'm here. Okay, because this is something which I really loved. And what you said about your feeling, right? How do you feel? I know exactly how I feel. I was looking at it. I would feel like I have an apple in my throat when I get very emotional and when somebody would talk down to me. Now, interesting, like what Priya asked, extempore, I would say like, oh yeah, no problem. But if somebody said do a prepared speech, like I'm going to say, okay, finish. I'm going to goof up, and it was very interesting, all that you said, touched upon mindfulness and all that I like. My quick question here is, bringing back to, I work with a lot of corporates and I'm always onto communication part. Can you give me some tips on, at the end of your presentation, whatever, how do you nail your client? What are those nice, interesting things that you can convince your client? Anything that you could suggest?
So you mean at the, can you just give me a sense of the context? Do you mean you do a presentation?
Yeah, you're doing a good presentation and you want your stuff to go well, or you're trying to convince your client to, agree to all that you're saying. Are there anything that you think towards the end, like you're going his way and he will say yes, he or she, whatever? Anything that comes to your mind?
So we didn't have time to get into it today, but when we talk about vocal image, it was one of the questions in our survey. Vocal image is that narrative which you want people to perceive you as, and it's the language which defines who you are. And so what I would do is have your vocal image narrative ready. So that all the language you want them to perceive you as, you should have it ready to go. And you should know at the end of that, this is how I'm going to, it's my closing speech, if you will. And that should always include power talk. So it should have, language which is inspiring their confidence in your skill. I'm not sure if you're selling a service or a product or what it is, but whatever it is that you're trying to sort of close, what you want to do is make sure that you are ensuring that you're the best, most reputable provider globally, or you have perhaps you're able to deliver on a certain timeline. Whatever their requirements are, you are summarizing in a very short narrative why you should be the top. For example, if this has been a tender and there are 12 different organizations pitching for that business, you should know, and it could be that you have a better relationship and you know them better. A lot of times if you say that we've been with you, we've been in the industry for 22 years and we've been by your side for 20 of those 22 years, you can trust us. So as soon as you start developing connection through your language, I think personally that goes a long way. If that's the case, I'm not sure if it's relevant to you, but it definitely works.
It does make sense, but I was wondering if you have anything that you have noticed which has always worked for you. But very true, again, culturally, what you said, you feel very bad to even say something good about yourself, or you're very shy to project yourself. You think it's going to be like you're, bragging about yourself. So that's what. Okay, thank you very much, and
you're welcome.
Appreciate it.
Shilpa?
I think Shilpa.
Yeah, really quickly because we are sort of overshot.
Overtime? Okay.
Yeah.
Quick question. It's a jumping off point to you asking us as an action item to be mindful of our heart rate or whatever our concern was when we were speaking. 2 tools that would help us be more mindful and help us get us back on track just before we need to give an important speech.
I'm sorry, it wasn't clear. You want 2 tools to help you be mindful?
No, to help us get back on track, to control the heartbeat, to control whatever's making us nervous or get the quiver in our voice, something that brings us back to the present so that we can present it properly.
Yes. Okay. So just like I explained to you, my scenario and what happened, that didn't just happen because I turned it on. It happened because I practiced it over and over and over again. So you're not going to develop that skill. If there's one message I can leave you with today, I briefly mentioned communication grit. Grit is discipline. And what I'd like you to do is put it in your calendar each week. Turn your mind to your communication skills development. And one of those could be to monitor how am I reacting in confrontational situations, or, just to bring your awareness. And then you can learn how to decrease that heart rate. And a lot of it is through breath exercises. I'm sure many of you do meditation, and many of you, I feel like we're a very self-aware group. I did not get into any of that, but there are breath exercises which help us decrease our heart rate. So that's something you can try. But to be able to do it instantaneously, that is something what you achieve when you have mastered the skill. But on a daily basis, if you can try to, like I didn't put it up today, but I have a menu, and I say, like, if I was to ask, how many of you plan what you eat? Last question before we go. How many people plan what you eat? How many people plan when you exercise? Yes. How many of you plan when you are going to communicate or improve your communication skills? Nobody, right? And so what I want you to do, please, is my plea to you. Start thinking about when you communicate, how you communicate, what words you use to communicate, and what message are you sharing? What's your vocal image? And how can you then improve in 3 columns to really put together your personal CQ puzzle? Yeah.
Thank you very much. That helps.
Thank you.
So I think we are done with the questions for the day. Yeah, Prasanna, over to you.
Yes, thank you, thank you. Thank you so much, Sue. And I have to say, your torture session was actually very enjoyable. And you're an amazing teacher because I had like some 3 pages of notes here.
Wonderful.
The aha moment for me is when you said, not to be mindful about not using the self-limiting words and to own the word, our own word and our contribution. As even Jyoti was saying, like, we are taught not to do that, but to actually come out and do that, it's how important it is. And what also resonated with me was when you spoke about changing the wording to change your inner reaction, and to that event, and how to change the mindset and how that affects the communication. So thank you so much for giving us some really valuable tips and some tools also which we could implement, and somewhere demystifying the CQ for us. And I think all of us have at least some pieces of our personal CQ puzzle solved right now after attending this workshop. I want to thank our past chairpersons who have joined us here. And I want to thank all the participants for making it actually very interactive and lively, and for filling out the questionnaire and actually playing full out, for giving your all. Thank you so much, because this is our first workshop in our knowledge series, and you've all made it a huge success. So thank you so much. Thank you, Sue, once again. Thank you, everybody. And I just want to add a quick reminder that about our upcoming workshops. We have one on 20th about to celebrate International Yoga Day with Shantala Medappa. And on 24th is our zero budget digital marketing with Aarti Srinath. And we'll be sharing the details with you, and hope you all sign up for it and make those also a success. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. That was a great session. Thank you, ladies. And yes, see you soon.
Bye, Sue.
Wonderful to meet you all.
Your neurology was great. Your neurology was perfect.
Was it? I don't know. I'm very nervous having you on the call, but thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Great. Bye, everyone. Thank you. Goodbye.